from Accel, Andrei Brasoveanu, and your moderator, Connie Loizos. Warm welcome, please.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we're all meeting for the first time, and I thought we could do everyone here a service who wants to sort of understand both of you better by talking a little bit about who you are, what you focus on. Do you want to start, Carolina? So I know that you studied in the US,
Yeah,
worked
of course.
in PE.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Carolina. Thank you again so much for having me.
Sure, pleasure.
I'm originally from Brazil. I moved to the US for university, spent over 10 years in the US, have worked in large cap private equity, have worked at a pre-launch, launch, failure startup, and then have spent a lot of my time in Europe, which has been 7 years now, at an earlier stage VC called Atomico, investing at Series A and Series B. And most recently, for the last year, I've been at Softbank Vision Fund, investing at the growth stage. So Softbank is the $100 billion fund, investing in technology companies that are, changing the way people live. And I can talk more about that later.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm Andrei. I've been with Accel for 6 years. Originally from Romania. Spent 10 years in the States, like Carolina, studying and working in New York in high-frequency trading. Here at Accel, I've been focused most of my time in enterprise software and financial services. And I've been very excited to back European founders, from London all the way to Bucharest. At Accel, we're one of the few value-based venture firms with on-the-ground presence in Europe. We've been here for 20 years, and we really believe in having a local approach to our investing.
Great, thank you both. So Carolina, I think your background, again, is so interesting, especially because you studied foreign policy and international relations at Georgetown. And then, as you said, you were with Atomico, whose partners we were on stage with yesterday.
Yeah, I saw it.
So you switched from Atomico to Softbank this year. Why switch firms?
I think there's a lot of push and pulls with these sorts of things. I think what remains true for me, and having moved to Europe in 2013, is that Europe is such an incredibly exciting place right now. And to be totally honest, back in 2013, I didn't totally see it, but over the years, you realize how many incredible entrepreneurs, how many incredible teams, and the opportunity that lays ahead. And I think firms like Accel and like Atomico were paving the path of the capital structure in Europe, which is actually very young.
Right.
Yeah, maybe the past 15 years there's been VC in Europe. And now you start to see the fruits of that and the exits and so on and so forth. So part of what it was for me was actually, I think there's great funds at the early stage, but there's still a lot of underfunding at that later stage. And so I was really excited about doing growth in Europe and putting significant amounts of capital behind founders who want to go for the really big outcomes.
Right. So aside from stage, early versus later, there's a lot of fascination with Softbank. I'm just wondering, you've got an insider's view of these two very important firms. What are some of the biggest differences? Aside from, I guess, the stage, like maybe some of the processes or...
Yeah, of course. Look, I think there's obviously a difference in size, right? Atomico's 70 people and Softbank is a 500-person organization. There is an interesting founder-led approach to both organizations. They are both very mission, vision-driven by founders who want to change the world. And by founders who want to be the best at what they do, which is really exciting. I think one of the key differences at Softbank is it's a really global firm. So we have offices everywhere. We have offices in the US, we have offices in Asia, we have offices in Europe, which for me has been a really interesting platform to see what other great founders are doing in other places of the world.
Right.
And then just because of the sheer size of the organization, you have a group of 50+ operating partners who may have really deep areas of domain expertise, like talent, but also who are helping our companies do business development and who can look at our ecosystem, which today is over 85 portfolio companies, and make connections and win business and actually win profitability for companies across and within that ecosystem.
Great. So you're both in town from London right now, even though you're from different parts of the world originally. Do you run into each other in deals, or are your worlds like vastly different right now?
Yeah, a bit. I would say we have quite different focus areas. So we're very much early stage focused. Series A is our sweet spot, and some of our companies, when they get to that very mature stage, may benefit from working with Softbank.
Okay, great.
We try to stay very close to the great companies at Accel so that they'll nudge us when...
right. When it's time. So I'm just wondering, who else are you seeing come into deals maybe who you might not have when you joined Accel in 2014?
Yes, it's very interesting. We, even since I joined Accel, the quality of institutional investors in Europe has increased dramatically. So we've seen quite a few, former operators, for example, so very successful founders who are now starting their own funds. We've seen more, family offices enter the industry, more U.S. capital in the market, and in general, I think that's helped, raise the bar in terms of the quality of capital available to founders across Europe, and many of these folks, especially the local players, have been good partners for us.
Great. And I talked to some VCs yesterday, and they were saying much more money's coming in from China. I don't know if it's closed, but I saw Mubadala was forming a $400 million fund to invest in Europe. Are there other sort of parts of the world that are you're seeing?
Yeah, I think everyone is interested in Europe, and I think it's a testament to the growth of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I think we've seen unprecedented company creation and a cohort, especially technical founders, who are for the first time imagining what's possible and really pursuing new ventures. So it's only natural that we will see the same level of interest and investment as the US or China sees.
What about corporates? They've taken over investing in the U.S. Is that happening here to the same degree, to a lesser degree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's really exciting to see is I think it used to be the case that founders had to take flights and go see VCs. They had to go to the Valley or they had to go to Asia. And actually now I hear stories about VCs chartering planes to go to remote areas in Europe to meet, a really exciting company.
Right.
And I think that corporates are very sophisticated in what they do and their areas of domain expertise, and are spending a lot of time, and are spending a lot of that time early with companies, seeing how they develop early on, maybe co-investing, helping them with partnerships and relationships. And I think, in Europe, you have really big corporates as well, from Europe as well as the ones from beyond, and increasingly there's an interest in spending time with the innovators in the specific spaces.
Okay, great. So we're here in Berlin, huge hub. I interviewed Klarna's CEO yesterday. They're opening an actual tech hub here to employ 500 people. I'm just wondering, what other parts of Europe are kind of bubbling up? I mean, everyone says everything is on fire, but more specifically, where are you seeing more sort of founders coalescing?
Yeah, sure. I would say it's quite interesting. So outside of the, let's say, obvious ones like Berlin, Paris, Stockholm, at Accel, we've been probably the largest software investors across Europe over the past decade. And many of these companies, especially given that technical universities pop up from all over the place, right? So we've backed amazing companies like UiPath in Bucharest, or Humio in Aarhus, or Celonis in Munich. And we see quite a long tail of really interesting hubs with quality talent where companies emerge from, which also points to why Europe is so hard to cover off the plane.
Yeah.
And you need a very strong local network and be here on the ground to find and support these companies early on.
And you're here today in Berlin. Tomorrow you're off to Spain to see one of your portfolio companies. What about you? Where are you seeing?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the interesting thing about Europe, and there's some huge benefits about the synergies in being part of Europe, but Europe is made of many different countries. And actually, one of the interesting things when I was reading the State of European Tech report is that there are billion-dollar companies in 20 countries across Europe. So again, there's enormous amounts of success everywhere. I think one of the areas we've been spending more time on outside of the obvious, places is in Eastern Europe, where I think there's a lot of talent, and there have been big winners already, and you're starting to see increasing activity of new business models or very interesting technology in some of these different places.
Right. And you must have sort of special insight into that, having.
Yes,
Right,
no,
Romania.
I've been there for 18 years, and I go back with pleasure. So
That's terrific. Okay, so for the founders in the audience, Accel, Series A specialist, what are you looking for? What do you need to see to write a check?
we're very long-term focused, so we love backing original founders, folks who have very bold ideas, and we open our doors as soon as founders are ready to work with us. And we're support founders for 10-year plus journeys, and we have the ability to support them from the Series A to IPO.
What do you need to see in terms of maybe traction, in terms of revenue, users, more specifically?
Yeah, we've been very flexible, especially because there's no one-size-fits-all formula for successful companies, and many companies we back are pre-revenue or even pre-product. And what we seek is a very unique market insight, a very strong team. A strong team doesn't have to be a repeat team or very experienced team. We back many teams out of college, but just founders who have a very unique approach to attacking a very attractive market.
Okay. And Carolina?
Yeah, so for us, I think the initial message is the same. We're looking for teams that have technologies that are disrupting a specific sector. We love large sectors that are undisrupted by technology because we believe that those have the large impact, right? Fintech, logistics, mobility, real estate, and so on. We do invest a little bit later at the growth stage in larger quantums of money, so we expect the core engine of the business to be working. So we expect that there to be proven economics on the most mature market, if it's a marketplace or part of the business, or early lighthouse customers. So there isn't necessarily a parameter on what revenue needs to be, et cetera, but you do need to show that the capital you'll be using for growth as opposed to finding, product market fit.
Right. Well, I have to ask you, because you're with SoftBank, and SoftBank, again, point of fascination for a lot of people, including, I'm sure, in this room. I'm just wondering if anything's going to change. So it's had sort of a rough last 6 months. It looks to have made a big bet on Uber it looks like it's overpaid right now. WeWork looks like it overpaid right now. WAG, it sort of, parted ways with amicably after investing a lot of money in the company. Your CEO, Masa Son, had said recently, he sort of attributed it to, he said, there was a problem with my own judgment. That's something I have to reflect on. Is the mission going to change, the mandate, the sort of scope, anything going forward in 2020?
Look, it's the question on everybody's mind, so I'll try to address it. The mission of investing in great teams, in mission-driven companies that are changing the way people live will not change. And I think I really appreciate the fact that you said right now, because SoftBank and Masa himself, they're very long-term thinkers, right? And I think hopefully the message that is that founders took away from WeWork and the way SoftBank behaved, after the IPO didn't go forward, is that we really will work with founders for a long time, right? And we will hold, stock in the public markets because we believe that, this is a 10, 20, 100-year vision. And so if we believe that a company will change that sector, we will commit to that, right? And I think, luckily, we have the amounts of capital where we have the ability to do that. So we won't be kind of, fair weather investors. We're really there, and we have the infrastructure and the capital to support these companies through thick and thin.
Well, I wondered, too, if you want to sort of address the narrative, widespread perception that the Vision Fund might not be able to raise a similar size fund. So right now you have a lot of resources. You've deployed a lot of those resources. So again, what happens in 2020? Is it going to be a smaller fund?
So I can't really comment on the size of the fund. I think we have a really strong relationship with our LPs. It's a really close relationship. And they're also aligned on the vision of the fund. I think on an execution level, we will spend, there's going to be a lot of attention now on things like governance and on things like unit economics, which I think is actually really healthy and really positive. And the Vision Fund is 2 years old. And people sometimes forget that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of learnings. There is definitely going to be a way forward, and the mission will remain the same.
One last question.
Yeah.
You talked about your LPs. One of these LPs, your major LP in the Vision Fund, Saudi Arabia, there's been a lot of sort of concern about Saudi Arabia, the civil war in Yemen, this Washington Post journalist who was murdered. Is Vision Fund, is the relationship with Saudi Arabia changed? Do you have any qualms about deploying money on behalf of Saudi Arabia?
Look, I think Masa has spoken about this publicly, right? And about what a terrible tragedy that was, right? And the fact that, of course, Softbank doesn't condone violence in any way, right? What Softbank is trying to do is use capital to bring technology to areas of the world that might not have access to that kind of deep level of technology. And so the effect that Softbank's trying to have with that capital is actually quite positive. Which, I think maybe is a message that sometimes gets missed. And, if you meet Masa, he is a very inspiring guy, and that really is his life mission, and that really is the legacy that he wants to leave, even beyond himself.
Andrei, I have to ask you, so in the US, SoftBank is sort of the bull in the china shop, aggravating a lot of investors, changing things, driving up valuations in many cases. Or it has been in the last couple of years. How is SoftBank viewed by Accel?
Yeah, I would say, many of the broader events definitely shed some, more focus on running businesses effectively. I would say, whether it's good, lean times or bad times, we've always been very focused on building a long-term sustainable business and helping founders focus on the long-term prize. And I think, certain situations, in recent times have, helped shed more light and kind of focus on having good operational metrics and a path to profitability long-term. But I would say it doesn't quite change what we do. We've always been focused on the, building something that's long-lasting, for a generation.
Before we go, I did want to ask you, and I talked to some of the investors on stage about this yesterday, but you're obviously going through a lot in London right now. Well, specifically today, this election's happening. I'm wondering, how does what's happening in the U.S. impact what's happening here? Is there are you seeing more people come to Europe because maybe they're trying to flee the U.S. or less inclined to move to the U.S. Who might have moved there at an earlier point in time just because things are kind of,
Yeah, it's interesting for us. We kind of look back, and pretty much in every single year, we've had major, billion-dollar plus companies being founded, and many of them which we've backed. And I think some of the best entrepreneurs thrive through times of crisis or thrive times of big macro uncertainty. Specifically around the US, many European companies we work with have very global ambitions. And for them, the US market continues to be critical. So regardless of the regime or kind of who may be in power, we'll still encourage many of the companies we work with, especially in enterprise software, to build roots in the US quickly and pursue them aggressively.
And then in terms of London, of course, we were talking backstage about this. If Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party wins, Brexit is likely to happen and possibly soon. I know it's probably too soon to know what's going to happen, obviously, but I mean, anecdotally, what are you seeing? Are fewer people setting up shop in London? Do you feel like it's already been sort of, priced into the picture?
It's hard to tell. I think it's been happening since 2016, and so I think I think what Andrei said is spot on, which is that entrepreneurs and dynamic teams are by nature, they thrive in these times of uncertainty, they innovate, and I think what we've seen is a lot of founders have had the time to kind of hedge if there is any risk in any of those parts of the business. And are staying ahead of that. I think there may be an effect on talent, so perhaps people who would have started a company in London and now started elsewhere. But it's also true that there's still big centers of excellence in the UK, places like Cambridge and Oxford and Imperial, where there's a lot of innovation coming out of those places. There's still money. So I think it's too early to have any data to back any of these things. And we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Great. Andrei, you agree?
Fully agree.
Yeah, great. Thank you both so much.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
How y'all feeling?